Hi, my dear. Today I will tell you guys about a love story between humans and monsters. Spring. The movie started with Evan hastily opened the door of his girlfriend's room. The scene ahead was probably he would never be able to forget in his life. His girlfriend suddenly turned into a slimy squid. Could he overcome this psychological obstacle? And continued staying with her? Let's watching how the story unfolded. It started a few months ago. Evan's parents respectively left him. The people who always wanted to live with him finally left him forever. This was a huge blow to Evan. So, his mood was extremely sad and painful. One evening when we were drinking in a bar with friends, a man deliberately messed with Evan. At last, he found a place to vent his anger. He made the troublemaker lose 4 teeth. So he not only lost his current job, but he was also bothered by gangsters. The risk of being arrested by the police was also very high. To avoid a nuisance and forget the pain of losing his loved ones, Evan decisively left America. At this time, traveling was a great way to regulate his mood. He didn't care where he was going to, and where would be the final stop. He had only one purpose, it was to relieve and forget all the grief in his heart. He heard that Italy not only had beautiful scenery, but also the girls here were very beautiful and charming. So, Evan decided to go to Italy. Just arrived. He met 2 friends, Mike and Tommy. They were very impressed with the culture in America, so just met Evan, they felt familiar. The 3 quickly became companions, went together to Paligna, a small coastal town in the south. In a small square, Evan saw a very pretty girl in a red dress. Even just a glimpse, but he was already feeling thrilled by that girl. Unfortunately, just a few seconds he did not notice that girl turned around. Evan was a bit regretful. However, he really didn't think this life would have many surprises. The next day, while he and his new friends were drinking on the beach, he met her again. If he had not taken the initiative to get acquainted, then perhaps there wouldn't have been any chance. So, Evan decided to get acquainted with her. He offered to offer her a glass of wine. She seemed to have seen through his mind. So, she answered bluntly, if he wanted to play, then she would immediately follow him home. Evan was surprised when he listened to it. There were not many girls who just talked a few words, was able to go home with others. Unless this was a prostitute or a scammer. So, he declined and rescheduled next time. Louise was misunderstood by others as a prostitute. She also didn't want to explain, then immediately turned around to leave. Evan was left alone. Louise really fascinated him. So, Evan decided to stay here for a while. At this time, there was a farm looking for workers. The owner was a very kind old man. He was completely unconcerned whether Evan emigrated legally or not, because there were not many young people now like to do farm jobs. His wife died long ago in a traffic accident. Just mentioned the past and remembered his wife. Happiness flashed in his eyes. The next day, after Evan finished all his work, he was walking on the street. He met Louise again. If the first was random, the second was of course. Then the third time was fate. He hurriedly chased after her and resumed the last topic. He wanted to understand more about her. Louise was still a student. She went to the museum to search for materials on genetics. She especially noticed the drawing of a girl on the rock which was over 2,000 years old. But Evan had no interest in this matter. What made him feel interested only was the girl standing in front of him. They told each other stories in the past. Suddenly, Louise said, a few years ago, an interesting guy was writing her a letter which touched her very much. If he'd written her a letter in which only included one sentence that touched her, she would agree to date him. Evan thought and wrote down his heart. The only reason why I stay in Italy is you. Louise found him extremely interesting and sincere. So, after drinking together, that night they were together. Evan completely didn't know. The next morning, Louise's face suddenly turned pale. She looked like a vampire hurried to leave. On the way she even killed a cat. Could Louise really be a vampire? One of her eyes was green. Some certain parts of her body were aging abnormally rapidly. So, she often had to inject a mystical drug into her body to control it. But Evan found out that he loved her so much. Louise was always hiding when talking about this. Seemed like she just wanted to maintain a physical relationship, but didn't want to talk about love with him. This made Evan think a lot. That night, suddenly, a large sore appeared on her thigh. Louise hid in the bathroom to inject drugs. And unfortunately for her, this time she was turned into a monster. Looked like a werewolf. After the injection was completed, Louise returned to normal. Morning when Evan woke up to go to the bathroom, he saw a syringe on the ground. He doubted she was addicted. But Louise said she was sick so she had to inject drugs. Even though they had just known each other for a short time, but Evan considered Louise as important to him. He told her the pain after her parents passed away, so he went traveling. and learned the meaning of life. Currently, he didn't not know what purpose he was living for. After listening, Louise did not know how to answer. She did not consider Evan to be a boyfriend at all. So she'd never mentioned to her story. Or maybe she was scared. If he found out about her secret, he would leave her. The fourth day. Transformation in Louise was more and more complex. Carelessly for a few seconds, the skin on her arm was decomposed extremely painfully. There was no other way. Louise had to hide in a rock slot to perform a mystical ritual. She killed a rabbit and ate it with blood until she returned to human form. That evening, while she was having a meal with Evan, then she discovered that her body was about to be mutated, so she immediately left. The places where her hands touched all quickly grew a species of tree. But she was not back home in time. She could not hold it any longer and began to deform. One man saw. He thought she was drunk, so he was going to play a joke with her. Unfortunately, because after turning into werewolf, she killed him and threw his body into the ocean. After killing, Louise started to fall into a state of self-blame. And she was alert to those around her. She knew she couldn't stay here any longer. Before leaving, she said goodbye to Evan. After Evan heard that, he did not understand why. He was in pain when she left him. A few seconds ago, he decided. Louise was the other half of my life. He tried to hold on. But Louise didn't give him a chance. At the time he was in worst feeling. The rancher talked about the immigration department noticed him. He had to quit his job. If he continued, he would be taken back to the station and returned to the U.S. That also meant it was time for him to leave. But Evan was reluctant. Looking at the sweet wedding ceremony scene in television, he couldn't miss the girl he loved. At this point, he understood clearly what the meaning of life was. That was being with the person he loved. Evan decided to go home to find Louise. He pushed the door and looked in and saw blood everywhere. Panic, so he broke the door and ran to find Louise. The scene before his eyes, he would probably never forget. Louise turned into a sticky squid. Looked like she was trying to grab the syringe that fell on the floor, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get it. Evan immediately walked over to give the monster an injection. He was so scared that his limbs were limping. Not long after, the monster turned into Louise. Evan tried to calm down to acknowledge the situation. Now he understood why Louise was always superficial to him, and refused to mention the future. She couldn't hide it anymore, so she told him. Louise was the girl in the painting 2,000 years old. More precisely, she was a female who had lived for more than 2,000 years. She got pregnant once every 20 years in the spring. During this period, she could change into any monster. Only by injecting embryonic cells could she return to her original form, and she kept peeling until the condition stabilized. Being constantly pregnant could help her keep the youthful and beautiful. Evan was her 100th boyfriend. They met about the time she needed to be pregnant. So when two people were together, the fetus was shaped. Louise didn't want to talk about the future because she didn't want to harm him. After knowing the truth, he felt he was just a tool for her to use. Evan tried to calm herself down. He called his best friend in America. He said he had a girlfriend, but she was a monster. What he should do. His friend asked if he had heard the story of the sorcerer and the white snake. Evan understood what his friend was saying. If he could not keep the one he loved. So what did it mean to be alive? He told Louise. He had seen goblins or monsters. Maybe she would eat him or something. Louise finished listening. She was deeply touched. But she still advised him to give up. A few more years. She was also always young and beautiful. And he would become an old man. The second reason was that she only liked Evan. That sentiment was not loved. Like at first sight would bring a feeling of excitement. And love was when they were together for a long time there would be feelings. They would never forget. She understood the difference between love and like. So she always kept some distance from Evan. Evan didn't care about that. Anyway, they had only known each other for 6 days. But he decided to choose her as his other half, no matter what happened. He would never change his mind. Louise said her 7th day of pregnancy. Also tomorrow. Her body would automatically produce a mechanism to kill the embryo. And became a monster that no one could control. If he was by her side, he would surely be in danger. After 7 days, she would able to maintain this state for 20 years. But if she truly loved someone, then she would not be deformed anymore but would become a normal person. Evan asked Louise if she really wanted to live forever. This question was difficult to Louise. Asking a girl to give up her ability of being young forever in an eternal life, because of one man she just knew for 6 days was too absurd. But what touched Louise the most? After knowing she was a monster, he was still beside her as before. He also wanted to spend 7 days with her in pregnancy, waited until she was safe, then he would be comfortable. He agreed to stay with her for the next 20 years. Even though she didn't love him. They went to Napoli. Went to the churches, went to the ancient ruins. Shared what she had met during the past 2,000 years. While with Louise, he was like a kid who didn't care anything. So she decided to tell him. Actually, for 2,000 years, she didn't feel happy at all. Although she could live forever. But she never had a real love. Her body could transform at any moment. Also meant she never loved Evan, until the last ampule was injected into her body. Louise brought Evan to the place she was born, the ancient city of Pompeii. 2,000 years ago, the volcano once erupted violently here. A lot of residents did not escape. They had turned into fossils. Because Louise's mother was in love with an ordinary man, she was burned by lava and died. She inherited her mother's abilities. So she was immune to lava. After her parents died, Louise was extremely afraid of death, therefore, we would seek immortality. Came to here, the two found a common voice. They were both heavily lashed after their parents died. So, Evan told Louise. Only through death did they understand the meaning of life. Death reminded those who were still alive. Life was extremely short. We didn't have much time left. So, the most important thing was to be with the person they loved. Even though Louise didn't love him, but he would still be with her for the rest of his life. He was extremely grateful that Louise was with him. In the time when he was most desperate. Together they admired the beautiful scenery. Evan's words made Louise shed tears. She was in his arms. The dawn was slowly emerging. Her body also started making monstrous sounds. But Evan was not afraid. Why he had to be afraid of the person he loved most turning into a monster? Suddenly that sound disappeared. Louise looked at Evan's face. Her eyes were also extremely happy without saying a word. Thanks, this life, for giving and receiving. She lost her immortal life, but in exchange for a real love. Since then, she fell in love with Evan and became a normal person. Living in the world, it was not necessary to light up the world like the sun. Just heat a small angle was enough. The movie ended here. I hope after you guys see this movie, you will have the same feelings as me. I really admire the character of the male lead, who would use any means to pursue the one he loved, and there was no need to think about the result. Love is not to wait, let's chase and seek. We will stop the movie here. Remember to like and share the video for me. Thank you for watching the drama. See you in the next exciting movies.